Daily Rambam for Tuesday, Hilchos Tavshin Pei. The third Perek Shlishi of Hilchos Krias Shma. Yesterday we learned the Perek Beis about the Kavana, the intent you have to have, the focus when you have when you say Krias Shma, and what if you're involved in something else and Krias Shma comes along, or diktuk, how to say the words right, and what if you say it out of order, or you get confused, and you make a mistake. And we learned about interrupting to say hello to someone. Today we're going to discuss quite a lot regarding places that you're not allowed to read Krias Shma, as we shall see. So let's get right to it. So the Rambam begins with the din of washing your hands, of cleaning your hands for Krias Shma. The Rambam says in Al-Halaf, Krias Shma, so if you're reading Krias Shma, you have to wash your hands in water before you read it. At the time of reading Krias Shma came, you didn't find water. You should not delay and start looking for water. Instead, you rub your hands on stones, dirt, piece of wood, etc., and you read Krias Shma.
What about sanitizer?
What about hand sanitizer? Why not? In Kesef Mishnah, he quotes in the Gemara that the Gemara says that Chista cursed someone who looks for water when it's time to daven, and the Gemara says Hanimili in Krias Shma, or maybe the Rif says Hanimili in Krias Shma, but Tefillah boila haduri. We'll see in Hilchos Tefillah. The din for Tefillah might be different. You should go for a while to look for water. The reason is Krias Shma is deiraisa, so they're machmir more in that the time shouldn't pass. So we don't want you getting too distracted with the water. So we're machmir in the zman Krias Shma over cleanliness. And Rabbi Menayach has a different reason that Krias Shma has a smaller zman, so it might pass sooner. Tefillah has a longer zman, so you have more room, more leeway to spend the time looking for water. And he also wrote that for it comes to Natilas Yadayim for Krias Shma davening, so according to the Rambam and the Rabbi, I guess later on, you should make all Natilas Yadayim for washing. And it says Rabbi Yaakov Kosav, I assume it's Rabbi Tam, that you don't make a bracha except when you're washing to eat or right away in the morning, because that's when you have to have water. That's when you must use water. But for Krias Shma and Tefillah, since you don't really need water per se, you could really use anything that cleans your hands so you don't make the bracha. And if you're on a ship, he says, then you can just wipe your hands on the walls of the ship or on clothing. Other options, it's much for Shabbos. Shabbos, you can't just start playing with rocks and dirt, so you can always find something. Now we're going to start talking about the places where you cannot read Krias Shma. Beis ein kaidon lebeveis hamerchatz, lebeveis hakisei, afa b'shein beitzaya, lebeveis hakvares, lebetzad hameis atzmei. So you shouldn't read Krias Shma not in a bathhouse. Of course, those days were public bathhouses, though should probably be the same if it's a private bathhouse, a personal one. So that might be just any bathroom. Lebeveis hakisei, bathroom. Even if there's no actual dirt in it right now, and not in a graveyard, not next to a dead body. And since those aren't particular, it's not a particular room, so you can just move away for Amos, and then you're not near that the grave or the dead body. And if you went ahead and said Krias Shma where you weren't supposed to, you have to say it again. Now the Rabbi comments here and says, if the Rambam really means to say that if you read Krias Shma next to a dead body as well, you have to go reread it, then that's nonsense. It's not true. The Kesef Mishnah says, why is the Rabbi getting worked up about this? Because there, the whole reason is only because of Loeg Larash. The other ones, you're in a place where you shouldn't say Davar Shebekdusha, but here it's just Loeg Larash. It's not nice for the dead body that you're doing a mitzvah and he can't do the mitzvah. So that's not enough of a reason to go reread. So it says, maybe Rambam Taka agrees that the Chomi Shekara b'makom she'en kreinin bo, maybe he wasn't including the B'tzad HaMeis, or Inami, if you're over al Divrei Chacham, it's a kanas, and even if it was a mistake, you should be careful next time. Okay. Now the idea that you can turn a Beis HaKisei into a Beis HaKisei without ever using it. Beis HaKisei Chodesh Hucham Adayin L'Nishtam Shivoi. You have a new bathroom and it was prepared and it wasn't used yet. Of course, we're talking about outhouses, just to understand the description. Whether the Beis HaKisei today is the same or not is another discussion. But so you could read Krias Shma across from it, facing it, but not inside. Merchatz Chadash, but a new bathhouse, it wasn't used yet, you can read inside. What if you had 2 rooms? And one of them you said clearly this is going to be my new bathroom, and then on the second one he said and this. So he didn't say clearly and this will be a new bathroom. He said and this. So the second one is in doubt. Did you actually set it aside or not? And here it goes according to what you set aside. So we're not sure. So therefore, ideally you shouldn't. But if you read Krias there, at least you're Yetza. It's not like earlier where you have to say it again. Omar v'gam zeh. But if he said and also this, he didn't just say and this. He said and also this. So then it seems clear that you were trying to say that both this and also this are bathrooms, so now we say they're both have been set aside, and they have the same halacha. The yard of the merchatz, so it's not the actual place where people are undressed, it's dressed, although it's part of the complex. Mutter likris by Krias Shma, you could say you recite Krias Shma there. Now the Rabbi comments here and says, "Vazmana b'veis hakisei." I think he's quoting the Rif. Vazmana b'veis hakisei letzluye begavei boy v'lo yefshita. He says that the question about hazmana, whether you can just turn a beis hakisei into one just by saying so, is actually a shaila in the Gemara that wasn't resolved. And the Rabbi says, "V'le kasav l'chumra." He didn't say that therefore we should be machmer. Maybe it should be lekula. The hakaimala. In general, we say hazmana lav milsi. Just to say that something is a thing is not enough. Mishum gzeira, Mishum bizayin hu dibarlan. The whole shaila of the Gemara was not that did you actually turn into beis hakisei. The shaila of the Gemara was, is there a gzeira maybe, or is it a bizayin here that you already called it a beis hakisei? So Hilchos sveika lekula. So it should be who said it's lechumra? Maybe it should be lekula. Or didn't say clearly. And Krias Mishnah responds and says that the Rambam paskins lechumra because you see in the Gemara elsewhere in the Gemara says mispal adam k'neged beis hakisei, the less beit tzaya. You could daven across from a beis hakisei that doesn't have tzayina, like the halacha we mentioned earlier. The Gemara says, what are we talking about? B'chadti, a new one. So mashma the b'taycha yaser. So from here it seems that inside it's also. So the Gemara elsewhere seems to be taken for granted that inside a new one would be yaser. We only said that if it's ein beit tzaya and it's chadash, you can stay connected. Also, we have the whole yesh hefresh. Yesh hefresh bedin hazmanis beis hakisei. All kinds of details. If you said zeh v'gam zeh, if you say hazmana doesn't do anything, then where do those halachas go? So if those halachas exist, so then obviously we must be assuming that it's l'chomer and not l'kul. Halacha daled, like Krias Shma levad, not just Krias Shma. Calling in Shuma Divrei Kodesh, anything that's holy, also Lamar Beis HaMerchatz or Beis HaKisei, it's forbidden to say it in the bathhouse or in the bathroom. If you said it in another language, and not just saying it, even to think thoughts of Divrei Torah in a bathroom or in a bathhouse or in a dirty place. And he defines what's makom matinoifes. It's any place where there is excrement or urine, any of this stuff, even if it's not properly a bathroom. Also, it is forbidden. So Krias Mishnah quotes Rabbi Menayach. He says that the Yushalmi, it says mutar lahar Divrei Torah beis hakisei. The Rabbi wrote that I'm assuming elsewhere that it's not arguing with this Gemara that when we said it's aser hani mil lechatchila. That means to consciously claim I'm sitting in the mouth and what should I think about? Let me think about Divrei Torah. That's aser. But if you're someone who learns so much and it's just pouring out of you, and while you're sitting there, the thoughts went into your head, wasn't conscious, it was almost against your will, that's okay. So that's what the Rabbi Menayach brings in the Yishalmi and the Rabbi. And the Krias Mishnah adds that really it's an Gemara as well, that tells in Zvachim that says Gemir Nadamar Beis HaKisei, that someone said Divrei Torah in Beis HaKisei or something like that, and the Gemara says, "Hey, how did he do that?" And the Gemara answered Lo Einsei Shainis. You see from the Gemara's Vachim clearly that there's a concept of Lo Einsei, and Rashi says that it was just he was thinking about it against his will. He didn't have a choice. So that is an exception to that. More on mutter and aser in the bathroom. Hey, dvan shel choil. If you're just saying everyday things, mundane things, you could say it using the language of Lashon HaKodesh. This ties in once mentioned before about the Rashab and using Lashon HaKodesh for every day. But at least if we're in this halacha, you could use Hebrew in the bathroom to talk about mundane things. And certain kinurim are used for the Eibishter that we may have also mentioned earlier, and you said the Atayr when we spoke about Shemus, that's what we're going to mention also in a moment. Certain terms that are commonly associated with Hashem, but they're not his proper title. So we say he's Rachum, he's merciful, he's gracious, he's reliable, however you want to translate those words, but they're not actual titles for Hashem. You could say it in the bathroom, Hashem is Yuchadin. But the unique names, the ones you can't erase, that we learned about, you can't mention it.
In regards to the Eibishter, you're using Racham V'Chana in regards to somebody else.
So I'm going to talk about that in a second. The Ravid's going to comment on Racham. Let's see.
Doesn't it say you're not supposed to talk in the bathroom?
Right, that might also, it's not being brought up here since we're just speaking about specifically in the context of Krias Shma, but I guess I don't know. Right, I don't know. It's a good question of whether is someone who's doing this being over on something, or there's some kind of exception. But for the context over here, we're just talking about regarding the words themselves. Are they right? Right. Good question. I think Racham V'Chana Naman is probably in the context of referring to Hashem. You're just trying to come up with a way of referring to Hashem in a permissible way. So that's probably what we mean. And the question is whether they're also used to refer to other things or not. That's going to be part of the question. Special names of Hashem and Hashem ones you can't erase. We learned about also you can't mention in a bathroom or in an old a bathhouse that's been used already, as opposed to a bathhouse that hasn't been used already. And if there's someone you want to tell someone something's usher, hey, don't do that, that's usher, mafresh, that you could do, and there's no restrictions, even if you're speaking Hebrew, holy things, no problem. So the Kasef Mishnah, a few things to comment here on this halacha. The Kasef Mishnah says, firstly, he has a question on the Rambam. Rambam doesn't mention about the word shalom. It's a clear Gemara that also la'adam shitin shalom l'chavedu b'beis hamerchatz. You're not to say shalom. The assumption is you're speaking in Hebrew. The most common way. Really, the problem is the word shalom. Shalom aleichem. But so the Gemara says it phrases it as don't give shalom, don't say shalom aleichem to your friend in the Beis HaMerchatz, because it says v'yikolei Hashem shalom, so Hashem is called shalom. Then the Gemara asks a question on it. What about Hemenusa, Hakel Hanemon? And we said that it is mutter to say Hemenusa. We say no. Hashem himself isn't called that. It's a description. It's like an adjective for Hashem. Hashem shalom. There Hashem himself is called shalom. So why did the Rambam only mention Shemus and Yuchadim? What about shalom? Look in the Bach and Simon Pedal. He also asks why. Why did the Rambam not mention it? And the Rif and the Rosh, they do mention it, both in Brachas and in Shabbos. And apparently the Rambam thinks that the Gemara's question about Hanemon actually was doicha that halacha, even though the Gemara seems to answer it. But that the Rambam must have a different understanding of that exchange in the Gemara. But he says, anyway, the Zui das Rambam, ve'enken das shara poiskim. El also has kishal b'veisakis b'veis hamarchatz v'achin aktinan. You look in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and Simon Pedaled. So your Alter Rebbe writes, v'abayis aprimi shekol ha'imdim shamim arumim. He's differentiating between the different rooms of the marchatz. If you're in the inner room where everyone's undressed, afilu she'ela shalom aser. You can't say shalom ki shalom hu shmei shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shenam yikolei Hashem shalom. You also can't do it in a dirty alley. What if you're not referring to, what if you just want to call someone by his name? You're not certainly not referring to Hashem, not even saying hello, you just want to call someone by his name. Some say you can't use his name, you have to use a nickname if there's some kind of nickname in Yiddish or something. Some say no, here you're not even referring to the meaning of the word. If you're referring to the meaning of the word, there's more of a connotation. Here it's just you're talking to this guy. So yesh matirin. Divrei seifrim in parentheses, divrei seifrim halach achar mekel, something like this with Rabbanan. That's not. It's just the word shalom. You can be mekel. Ravid. Now the Rabbi here says, he disagrees with the Rambam about Rachum, and he says, we only find Rachum, who else was ever called Rachum besides Hashem? So the Kasef Mishnah comments that Rabbeinu Yaina said, Ashkon, it says in Tehillim, Zarach b'chayshech orlei yesharim, Chanun v'rachum v'tzadik, and the whole capital is talking about the tzadik, it's calling him, Chanun v'rachum v'tzadik. It says over there, Hain v'yeshe b'veiso, it's a kasem edes lad, it's all one hemshech that when he has the Hain v'yeshe b'veisoi and then he's a Chanam Barachim Tzaddik. Looking now to Rebbe Shulchan Aruch Siman Pei Hey. So a lot of halachas there relating to this. So first, our author mentions, if you're saying something and you walk through a dirty alley, that's a Rambam going to talk about later in halacha Yadalad. And then the Alter Rebbe says, anywhere that's dirty. That's all the halachas we're talking about. So this is going back on what we learned in halacha Dalad. That you can't even think about, even though you have a chiyuv really at every moment to learn Torah, but not in the bathroom. And then he says practically, I think this is from Sefer Chassidim or whatever. He says now is a good time to start thinking about your finances, your numbers, go do your calculations. Then good opportunity. Here to avoid. Otherwise, if you're such a ben Torah that if you're not thinking about anything, your mind's automatically going to return to Torah. So actively think about something else. Shabbos, also but on Shabbos you can't think about your finances. What are you going to do then? So you find a liba lahara b'tziyurim u'binyonim noim. So then you should think about the pictures, nice buildings, and similar things in the imagination. Something that's going to draw your mind away from thinking about davar shebekdusha. You can't even learn Hilchos Beis Hakisa. I'm in a Beis Hakisa. Let me learn Hilchos Beis Hakisa. I'll pull out this Perek of the Rambam and I'll learn. No, Hilchos Beis Hakisa. It's not that the trick doesn't work. Now, there's actually, there's a few more halachos that I want to bring to the Rebbe. There's actually a very interesting conversation between the Rebbe and the Rav Mordechai Eliyahu from Vav Cheshav and Tafshin and Beis. It's printed in Sefer Hilchos. That Mordechai Eliyahu said over there that I always tell people that if you say l'shem yichud by every mitzvah, that helps with the mitzvah tzrichas kavana. Because otherwise, do you have kavana? Do you not have kavana? If you say l'shem yichud before every mitzvah, so then you took care of the kavana. The Rai said the Rabbanan. So the Rebbe told him, min chabad is that we don't say l'shem yichud before every mitzvah. We say one l'shem yichud at the beginning of the day before Baruch She'amar. And we said that l'shem yichud at the beginning of the day is so powerful that it's like a disclaimer. Everything I'm going to do throughout this day is l'shem yichud k'tshebirich l'shem te'ach l'shem yichud v'vavke. You don't have to repeat it every single time. It's all included. So Eliyahu responds, I didn't know that was meaning Chabad, but I actually said something similar to that idea regarding the kavana in Hashem Shemus. The halach is you have to be mechaven with Yud Kevavke, Ba'adnos Sho'adayin HaKoil, and the Ksivasa, Yudkei that Hayahayu V'yiyah, and Elikim, Takav Bal Yecheles. Now, how many people can actually think of all those kavanas every time they say Hashem's name in Elikim? So he says, I said you should have the kavana once at the beginning of the day and say that's your kavana for all the brachas you're going to say throughout the day. That's similar to what you're saying, what the Rebbe is saying about l'shem yichud. I think there might even be some people that have like a text. They also say at the beginning of the day, like I'm announcing that I'm being mechaven kevavke elikim throughout the night. So the Rebbe said that's also regarding limud Torah. Like you make one berachas Torah in the morning at the beginning of the day, and that helps for learning throughout the whole day. Even after you interrupted, even if you made a hafsek and you're mesiach das. Even if you went to sleep, even if you took a nap, you went to sleep. It's in the Beis HaMikdash. If you go to sleep, then you have to go and do Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim again. But for Birchas Torah, you said it once in the day. It's a very powerful bracha. He said that certain things are so powerful. He said at the beginning of the day, and that's enough. So Eliyahu responded, and he said that when it comes to Hesach Hadas and learning, you also have the issue of going into a place where it's forbidden to think about Divrei Torah. So he says the Beis Yosef brings that someone that there's a makar that says that even when you go to the Beis Hakisa, ein masiach dai timilumed. Somehow your mind is still, to whatever extent, it is focused on learning, so you never really it's not really a hafsek. Another reason is the avshu nifnet tzarich lizar bedinim k'may begilei tefach v'chetzad yikaneach. Even when you are in the bathroom, you are being mekayim certain halachas because how much of your body should you expose? How should you clean yourself? Right hand, left hand. Back when they use their hands. So there are halachas actually practically that you're implementing when you're in the bathroom. So in a way, you still are involved with Torah to one extent or another. So Rabbi said that he responded, but again, now getting to the point over here that the machshava. Even this place where you're not allowed to think about Divrei Torah, you can think about that. Think that fact. If you sat there the whole time, you thought to yourself, I'm not allowed to think Divrei Torah. I'm not allowed to think Divrei Torah. This is a place I'm not allowed to think Divrei Torah. That itself, which you are allowed to think, I mean, otherwise, yeah, you're sitting there, you have to tell yourself, I can't think about Divrei Torah. So that itself eliminates the problem of Hesach Hadas. Not a Hesach Hadas from learning Torah anymore. And the Rebbe adds, because it's the Ge'el Maisa, what does the halacha say? L'hafish midavar aser mafrish. If you want to stop someone from doing something prohibited, you could speak in halachic terms. So if you're in the bathroom and you're about to be nichshol, so you have to say, oh, it's usher. You can you saw someone else. If you saw in the base of Merchatz, you saw someone else with different Torah, you can tell him take the Rambam that it's also lahar with different Torah. So you can see how even when you're in such a place, there's always a shaykhus, a connection to that was the end of that part of that conversation. I just noticed that there's actually a point there that relates to yesterday's halacha. Liel mentioned that there are those who think kavanas. When they're in the mikveh, there's kavanas ha-mikveh. So how does that work with thinking about the kavanas and the kavanas ha-mikveh? So since the mikveh is at least 10 tfachim deep, so it's own rishus, and you can think divrei Torah if the erva is not visible. So the Rabbi said that yesterday we quoted the Shulchan Aruch that your hand doesn't help, but there's another next if we didn't mention. The Rabbi quotes over here that if you go like this with your arms, then we say that it is chashuv hafsaka ben liboy avsha yad in chashuv kisui because they live in the yard or one guf, but that's such a big hafsaka and the lave can't see the erva, it is counted. So the Rabbi mentioned that in response. It's not just the cheshbon of the 10, you just go like that. That's practically for those who are mechavan kavanas. And so Liel mentioned, you have the same shayla attack about covering your head. You say the same thing, that covering your head with your hand doesn't count. So everybody responds to something interesting. He said that covering your head isn't as chomer as covering the erva. Because we see the time of Shas, they weren't careful about kisei harayish. That's all the Rebbe said in this conversation. I mean, it's more of a discussion, but the way the Rebbe, I think it's based on the Alter Rebbe Madura Basra. The Alter Rebbe says there that people did go bareheaded. The Rebbe says in the most recent generations, in the time of the B'Seisef and the Ramah, the Rebbe said it became mamish like official that you have to always cover your head. You have to wear a yarmulke. It's chassidus, which is how the Alter Rebbe defines it there in Madura Basra. So he says it could be a mol was exeirish and revat sibi yochalam and v'mashenki now. All right, so that's just an aside, interesting aside on this topic. And back to the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe spoke about hair in the bathroom. And then he says devarim shel choil. So you could say in Hebrew, Amidas Chassidus is lahachmer, not to speak in Hebrew in the bathroom. Arachim v'chanan v'nemod you could say, and he quotes the pasuk Chanan v'rachim v'tzadik just so that it's clear. Then what about
what type of modern Hebrew or regular?
Modern Hebrew didn't exist. That's I don't know if practically we pass on the modern Hebrew is there. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, people in Israel surely if they're talking in Hebrew. So.
That's not the Hebrew we're referring to here.
No, thank you.
I don't know. I mean, the Fidei Rebbe, because I mentioned once before, the Fidei Rebbe mentioned once that it's not the same language. To what extent do we really say that? I don't know. There's so much of the original Hebrew mixed in. Then he talks about the shemus of Hashem. So he says, you're not to say Hashem's names. And he adds, afilu b'lashon choil. Even in other languages, the hainu shem shakadosh baruch hu nikra b'fikol am b'lashon sheyiyah. The proper name for Hashem in any language, going got, b'lashon Ashkenaz, or baga b'lashon Poland v'Russia. So God in English, same obviously God. So after shem ze'em be'kedusha ba'esis ksivasa mutal machan. Even though in writing he says it wouldn't be a problem to erase, which is at odds with the practice of putting a line. This doesn't seem to fit with what the Alter Rebbe says here. He says you would be allowed to erase it, but sometimes the dibur could be more chomer than ksiva. He brings a raya that sometimes that's the case. And then Magabi, the last thing about telling someone that something is aser, he says you can even say the lashon hayrosh aser lasis kach. You don't have to be careful with your language and say al tasa kach instead of saying aser, because aser sounds more tighter. Al tasa just means don't do it. You don't have to be careful and say don't do it. You could say it's awesome. He says, if he starts thinking about a woman, if the thinking about Torah is going to save him from Machshavas Asuras, so that's then go think about Torah. It's better. All right, let's get back to the Rambam. Now we're going to have a lot of halachas about soya. I wasn't planning on elaborating too much, so let's go through it. Allah Vav Tzayas Adam, but Tzayas Klavim V'Chazin Uzman Sheish B'Teichen Oides V'Chol Tzayas Sharei Charak V'Goyin Elu Also Likris Krias Shma Kenegdon. So the excrement of a person or dogs or pigs, which are I guess particularly vile, if there's skin in it, whatever the case is, you have to know the reality. You have to live on the farm to be familiar. Or anything that has a bad smell, it's up to your judgment to determine. So then you can't say Krias Shma in the presence. Or a person's urine. But animal's urine, Kaiden Kenegdan, it's not so foul, and especially because if you live around them, it's just people have cats and dogs. I guess it's common. You have it around the house. It's not a problem. A child. Now, what about a child? And we know a very young child is not so doesn't have such a bad smell. So where do you draw the line? It said if he still can't eat a kazayas of grain of bread. In the time that a gadol could eat 3 eggs, which is what we call kadei achilas pras, according to the Rambam. So if you can't eat a kazayas kadei achilas pras, you don't have to stay away neither from his excrement or his urine. Right? It says over here, here the Rabbi makes an interesting observation. I think it's the first time he's saying that. He says he noticed that I'm always like following the Yerushalmi. But here he didn't. It said over there that the urine of a donkey that came from the road is also worse, is also something you shouldn't read. And also, what about the chickens? And then the Kesef Mishnah says that it could be that Ram's Gersa was not made a glayim, but glolim. So he already said that the kol tsaya sharei chara. So if you think the chamor is included or the tarna goyim, so include it. Halacha Zayin. If it was dry like earthenware, also liquid is connected, it's still also. And if it's even drier, it's completely dry. If you throw it, it'll crumble. Offer it turn into dirt. You can read them. If the urine got absorbed in the earth, if it's still moist, to mix your hand wet to touch, also liquid is connected, and then it's still considered to be. Then you can't read them. If it wouldn't, then mutter, then it's okay. How far away should you step away from these things? 4 amas, 4 amas. When it's behind you or to your side. But if you're facing it, if it's facing you, and then you can't even look at them. And then you can read. When do we say that you have to stay away? That's if you're on the same level in the house. But if you're on an elevation, 10 tvachim high, or the opposite, you're 10 tvachim below, then you can sit even near it, because there's a hafsek, as long as the smell isn't reaching you. Or if you covered it with some kind of kli, even if you're in the same room, it's like it's buried, you're allowed to read over there. Yud. What if there's a glass partition dividing? Even though you could see it through the glass. Earlier we said that if it's connected panav, you could see it, you have to go very, very far away. But no, if it's through the glass, mutter likrois betzida, then you're allowed to read beside it. Nas nevias mayam latoich meraglaim shel pam achas. And let's say there was urine shalpam achas, meaning someone went to the bathroom once. That's how much the shear, and you add a revius of water to that. Then it's diluted, and you can read the Teich Al Amos. And the Kesef Mishnah says, Rabbi Meneach said, "Sorechian pam achas." Not every time you go, it's the same amount, but the Kesef Mishnah says they must have made a cheshbon that a revius covers all quantities of going once.
That would be a good today's modern bathroom where you flush.
As I said earlier, that today's bathrooms there might be more of a discussion. The Gemara mentions the Bisakisa Shel Parsium, where it was like a diagonal, and
they had a flow of water.
Right. On the other hand, it's a discussion. There are different opinions. Yod Aleph. If there was tzaya in a hole in the ground, or even you can step over with your shoe and read. As long as your shoe isn't touching it. If it's touching it, then you're in contact with it. If there's just such a tiny amount, like a drop, you spit, thick spit over it, until it gets covered over, then it's fine. You say, what if it's just such a tiny smidgen on you? Or your hands are dirty from the bathroom. Again, you said use your hands. But there's no bad smell at all because it's so minute or it's dry. You could read it's another bad smell. It sounds like also in those days it was just more common to be a bit more dirty, so you can't go that extreme. But if it's in the original place, not on your body, it's where it was all along. Oh, sorry. Kaima is a euphemism. It's in your body, in the place where it came from. It's still like sort of the edge. It didn't come off of your body. So even though when you're standing, it wouldn't be visible. If you would sit down, it would be visible. So so you have to clean yourself very well. You have to have a gufnakim. You should say alachi. It's dirty. It's wet. It has a bad smell. And the number of Goyim said you shouldn't read if your hands are still dirty from the bathroom, and that's the proper thing to do. The Ravid says, regarding the first halach about stepping on, he says there is a difference between stuck to your shoe versus just touching it. That's a whole that's one thing he talks about. I'm not getting into it. He also mentions that the Yerushalmi, it says the spitting on it only helps right away, but after a while the spit dissolves. Kesef Mishnah responses, obviously if the spit dissolves, then we didn't have to say it. It's so obvious. Halach Yud Beis. If there's a bad smell that has a source, you have to go 4 amas away from it or read and pasak hareach. If you can't smell it 4 amas away. So if you can't smell it, 4 amas is good. And loy pasak, if even 4 amas you can still smell it, so you have to go further where you don't smell it anymore. If there's no source, someone pass gas, so you just leave the spot where there's a smell and you can read. Also, look at Krias Shma. If you have a potty for either Re'i or Meimer, so you can't read Krias Shma in front of that. Even though there's nothing there, there's no smell, because it's like a mobile bathroom. So a mobile bathroom is like a bathroom, it doesn't matter. And the Rabbi disagrees with the Rambam. He says that the shir of Dalet Amos is fakert. You have to find where the smell ends and then go Dalet Amos away from that. If you look at the Shonach Seminayin Tess, the Rebbe says Mish Larech Tzarech Shlei Yerech B'Teich Dalet Amos Shalach Shalach V'Tzon Shem Lekenei Machaneu Kadosh. V'Ich Tzarech Lahach Dalet Amos Mak Mishakal Yerech. So he seems to go to the Rabbi. You have to go for Amos away from where the smell is. Even if now with Corona it's a little more common, people have I forgot what it's called in English, but the chayla where you can't smell. You have to find someone who could smell, and you have to determine where the smell ends for him, and go Dalet Amos away from that. But the idea that if it's Milafanov, earlier we said Milafanov, if you have Tsaya, you have to go away, but if here you don't have to go Malay Einov, because you can't see, it's just a smell. Okay, so if it's just floating past you, you can't read in front of it. And the mouth of a pig is that dirty, it's like a passing tzaya. And you can't read until they move far away from you. So this is you're walking, you're saying, and you walk into a dirty place. Don't cover your mouth and then you're reading. Pause until you leave. Someone who was reading and he passed gas. Wait till the smell subsides. And then he continues reading. Same for learning. But if it came from his friend, that would be so you do stop for Krias Shma in the mafsal you don't interrupt your learning. You're saying Shma in your house and stopping the mission you're not sure whether there is something dirty there or not. And you could read. But if you're in the garbage dump and it's stopping you have a doubt, you have the first check and then reach. We assume that there's tinifus in the ashpa. I feel about but if you only have a doubt about urine, then even in a garbage you would be allowed to read. It's just a doubt. Now we talk about erva. Just like you can't, as we just learned, you can't read in front of this stuff until you go away. Someone's erva, she helps your fun up until you turn your face away. I feel a cotton, doesn't matter if it's a guy or a child, you still have to turn away. Even if it's glass, hair goes by appearance. If you see it, also look at how you still have to turn your face. And the whole woman's body is considered erva. Therefore, you shouldn't look at the body of a woman at all when you're reading. Even if it's a woman, and even if it's his wife, if there's a tafach revealed, you can connect that. I have here from the Alter Rebbe where he qualifies it. We don't really have time for that. Yud Zayin. Same goes for your own erva. Don't read while you're naked until you're undressed, until you cover. If there's something covering that area of your body, I'll be sure even though you're mostly undressed. You could read. It's not like the problem that you're undressed. As long as your heel isn't touching your erva. If you're under your blanket or your sheet, then you're undressed. You just make sure that the sheet is blocking by your heart. under your heart, and you can read from your neck, because then your heart and your ever are in the same space. It's like someone who read without covering himself. Two sleeping under one sheet. Each one cannot say Shma, even though he covered himself under his heart, until there's a sheet between them as well. So this person's flesh isn't touching this one's under their waist. If you're sleeping with your family, which was common, you had a whole family sleeping together and they're not really dressed, and a gufan kegufay, for that we say the body is like one big body. Any margish mihan, you're not conscious that it's their body. But even though you're touching them, you turn your face, you make sure your heart's not seeing your own erva, and you read. Last halacha, you test, are they Muslim? To what extent do we consider them ktanim lekula, that you're not margish? Until the zachar is 12 in a day, and until the nekeva is 11 in a day. And that's assuming that they hit puberty, their body reflects that. And once they hit puberty, so then you have to have a talus in between them. If they didn't hit puberty, even if they hit the age technically, but their body didn't catch up with their age, you can still touch them without a hefsek. The deadline is if they turn 13 and 12 respectively for born again.
Yeah.